All right. Well, everyone, welcome to another episode of Faithfully Engaged. On today's episode, I have Rebecca Velo. She is a wife and a mother of four with one on the way due in August. She is just a concerned citizen, likes to speak out on behalf of just some of the cultural concerns going on. She is an editor at Wrong Speak Publishing, and she actually just had an article published at the Federalist. So, Rebecca, it's nice to have you on today.
Thank you. It's nice to be on.
Yeah. So let me start with the Federalist thing. We were kind of talking off camera a little bit about that because
Right.
I had an article on there as well. Just tell me a little bit about that article and yeah, kind of what led you to write that article that was on the Federalist.
Yeah, well, I love the Federalists. I've been following them for quite some time, so it was a good honor to be able to showcase my work on there. And what I basically wrote about is I feel like those of us who are fighting the culture war, so to speak, we tend to segment into many small sort of like battles, right? And we lose sight of the overall cultural war itself. And so I hear many people, they'll say, well, my big issue is pushing transgender ideology onto children or having men in women's sports. I'm fine with all the other issues, but it's this particular thing that seems to bother me. And I think that when we do that, we lose oversight on the overall issue here, and it becomes almost impossible to say, well, we'll accept trans women in every segment of society except in sports, or we'll accept transgenderism except with children. And what you'll end up having is sort of like a mission creep where, okay, we'll say, we'll accept transgenderism at 18. Oh, well, what's the difference between 18 and 17? And then what's the difference between 16 and 17? So I think we need to keep an eye on the big picture and push back on it as a whole, and not just when you're looking at something like transgenderism, but critical race theory with the COVID restrictions and the climate change insanity. It's all part of a bigger puzzle, and we need to focus on that. Our goal needs to be to end the insanity entirely, not just these whack-a-mole, these little bizarre issues that keep popping up.
Yeah, and I really like that whack-a-mole type of language there. We just kind of full disclosure, we had another Rebecca and I had another podcast tape before, and there's some technical issues. So we've talked about some of these topics before, and that was just a few weeks ago. But since then, what's been in the news has shifted dramatically, and that's just that point. In the grand scheme of things, 3 weeks or whatever isn't long, but in the news cycles, go, 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 and
Exactly.
it never ends.
No, it doesn't. In fact, I saw an article, I think it was from Fox News, that came out either yesterday or the day before, talking about trans ableism. And so, what that is where an individual believes that they should have been disabled, could have been blinded, not having the ability to walk, or so forth. And that is a thing. It's becoming a thing where people are seeking out doctors who will actually disable them, remove their limbs, blind them, and so forth, so they can live the life that they believe that they were meant to be as a disabled person. This used to be called, I believe, body integrity identity disorder, and we're doing sort of the same thing we did with transgenderism, is in saying, well, should this be a diagnosable condition in the DSM? Maybe we should pull this
Mm,
out uh, to spare people's feelings and so forth. And I really don't think that's a good idea. It's the slippery slope. We're
yeah,
not. It's not a matter of we're going to get to it. We are on it, and we're slipping down it, and it's going really deep.
yeah. No, that is undoubtedly it's hard. I'm hard pressed to really trust your opinion if you don't at least have some acceptance of that slippery slope fallacy at this point. And I know we call it fallacy, but that just seems to be reality.
Yes.
It's I know it's hard for us as humans to really um just sink in the changes over the years. Here's an example. It's springtime here, every year, and here in Oklahoma especially, we have quite a few wildflowers, and every year, these wildflowers sprout up in the same spot, the same type of year, and every year, I drive by them, April and May, and I'm like, "Wow, these are so beautiful, I forgot how beautiful these are," and I've lived here my whole life. It's no surprise, but just that sink in of that emotion, I don't think we're really, really great at doing that. That's that whack-a-mole. We're so I'm used
Right.
to, the winter and all that stuff, and I it just didn't sink in as much, even though intellectually I know those flowers come back every
Right.
year. And I think of that. I was having a friend with or a conversation with a friend, just recently of we were talking about, like, Caitlyn Jenner and all of that. How when Bruce Jenner, that's what we always call that's kind
There
of
you
our
go.
derogatory joke there. Bruce Jenner, when transition said, "Hey, I'm Caitlyn," and had that, magazine thing on was it Vanity
Vanity
Fair?
Fair, yeah.
Yeah. That was like, "Whoa, this is the craziest thing ever." And it's hard for me to be back in that time frame. That was like 2014 or 15.
I think it was 2015, yeah.
That's so normalized. The guy is on Fox News now. Like, it's hard for us to go back in time and actually be in that 2015 version of ourselves. We're not very good at going back there, and it's particularly with some of the gaslighting and things like that in the media, like, "Oh, no, somebody that goes to the doctor and they wanna be blind or, be amputated, that's normal, that's not that big of a deal." No, that's not normal, and
Right.
we to your point, we need to be aware that these ideologies, they don't stop at 1 or 2 things. They happen in a lot of different ways.
Exactly. And then there's more forms of transism. There's transracialism, transageism, and transspeciesism, where people are trying to turn themselves into, excuse me, animals, lizards, and different types of things. And it's truly bizarre to me that we have decided, or the powers that be have decided, that we'll accept transgenderism. That's okay. That's normal. But we're still kind of iffy about all the other ones. There is no way legally or socially that you can say transgenderism is okay and you can declare yourself a man or a woman, just the simple statement, and that makes you a man or a woman. But we can't do that with race.
Mhm.
You can't tell me that I can't call myself black, but then tell me I can call myself a man. It doesn't make sense, and it's not going to make sense legally if they continue pushing these types of laws where they are basically implementing self ID as a sort of de facto law now.
Yeah. Well, and kinda to that point on if we had to pick of race or sex of those being able to change, I am much closer with a black man as
Yes,
far as genetics goes. Like, yeah, there's obviously some melanin and all that stuff, but by and large, we're both males. I have a lot more common in that than with a white woman. Like, that's
right.
a completely different biology, different genetic makeup, and but yeah, why is that okay for me to say that I'm a woman and society accepts that, but if I say I'm black, I mean, I we say that, but to your point, that transracialism, that stuff is gaining steam,
Yeah,
it yeah, you can't just pick and choose that stuff. I think that your point is very important one, definitely on the conservative side of things that people need to understand. You can't be lazy in some of these fights.
right. And it's an important one on the progressive side as well, because guess what? This is going to be used against you. And I don't think they realize that. I think that they're truly thinking, well, we have the power where we can actually pick and choose because we're in this elitist position. We're the ones sort of controlling society at this point. They can choose what's acceptable and what's not. And that's just not the way it goes. They're not going to be able to push the floodgates and say transracialism is wrong, but transgenderism, let's accept it all. It's just not logical.
Well, and that last word there of logical is one on particularly on the pretty extreme progressive side. Obviously, there's some level of logic that's involved over there, but it tends to be based very emotionally. And yeah, there's going to be times where what's emotionally feels good for me is not logical and is not
Right.
actually good for me, but emotionally it feels that way. And as long as that's your God, it will take you all sorts of directions that unfortunately we're seeing some of the results of today.
Right. And I think that it's actually a lack of logic. They don't have a lot of logic on that side. It's very much just ideology and emotion.
Yeah. And it's frustrating on my end of, kind of my profession being a counselor that I understand that emotions have importance. Like we don't need to just completely disregard. And I do see this some. I won't say it's necessarily majority, but I see it some on the right to where yeah, all emotions are it's just stupid. Like we
Right.
basically just need to be robots and just do the right thing. And that we're not made that way. We are emotional creatures, but we're made to not be ruled over by our emotions, and that is what's happening on not just the fringe left. I think this is what's kinda concerning, is it seems
Right.
to be more of the mainline left
Yes.
that your emotions just rule the day, and
Exactly.
that turns us into tantrum little toddlers, and that's not good.
And it's even creeping into areas like science,
Mm,
the medical field, and that's really scary to think that you're going in and you're seeing a doctor, and this doctor, he went to Harvard, he's supposed to be one of the best doctors, but instead he's more concerned about equity, and treating people based on their identities rather than looking at the body and treating the body, which is what he's supposed to be doing. So that's really scary. I read, I can't remember what university is. I think it's a university in Florida, actually, and they were saying that they're no longer going to separate when they're doing certain tests, looking for cancers and so forth. And I'm not a medical person, so I don't know exactly what the terminology is, but they're going to, rather than saying we're doing this specific test based on a female or a male, we're just going to kind of lump them together and make a different range for just human, not the male range,
no,
not the
no.
human range. And basically the way they justify it is, of course, this makes trans people feel better, and that the differences are so small that it would be negligible if someone were to be injured because we're not testing them properly. And what if you're the person that's in that small margin that is hurt?
Mhm.
Do you want to be that person just so someone else can feel better because they're pretending to be something that they're not? Of course you don't. Why are we doing this? It just doesn't make sense. We're shirking science and technology in place of people's feelings, and it's not progressive at all. This
Yeah.
isn't going to progress us in any field. We're not going to get to Mars. We're not going to get super advanced flying cars and so forth. We're not going to be able to get any of these cool things as long as our focus is on people's feelings as opposed to actually moving forward.
Yeah, the stuff with male and female bodies especially,
Yes.
just to my point earlier, that that black male, um, are there going to be some differences biologically? Yeah, a little bit. I mean, her skin color is a little bit different. There's some traits of black males that tend to be in one sphere that are different than white males in a different sphere. But again, by and large, those tests that they run, they're probably gonna be the same test
Right.
because 'cause we're both males. But
Exactly.
for my wife and I, they're gonna be very different.
Right.
We have vastly different hormone structure, bone structure. Um, just mentioning before uh, with Rebecca being pregnant, my wife is pregnant as well. One of the extra difficulties that she's having is, she's having pelvic separation, as she had this with the previous, pregnancy, that basically her pelvis is trying to separate earlier than is necessary,
Mhm.
and she's, like, 22, 23 weeks pregnant at this
Okay.
point, but, so it's painful, it's one of those where it's much more of a comfort thing,
Mhm.
thankfully, it's, very uncomfortable, but she's gonna be okay, but we were just talking about that, of how the female pelvis, obviously through childbirth, has to do all sorts of crazy things
Yes.
that a male pelvis doesn't have to do. So the actual structure, like when we die, our bones, you'll be able to see that, like, oh, that was a woman, that's a male. And I have no idea how we got to the point where that's controversial to say that, but it's just a biological reality. So to your point, where we're making not just some silly gestures of, like, I know pretty much all hospitals now, it's like, "What sex were you born as or identified as?" Or I don't know, whatever
Yes, assigned at
nonsense.
birth.
Assigned at birth, there you go, which I'm sure you love that as being a pregnant woman,
Yeah.
getting to answer those things. Um, that's silly, I've always thought that was dumb,
Yes.
but at least the maybe the argument would be, well, we're still saying sex is a static thing, so we're going to gender identity, but the sex is still biological. Well, your example you gave, we're showing that we're not gonna stay there. We're
Yes.
gonna keep going, and
Right.
people's lives are legitimately at risk, no matter how minimal they might say it is, even
Yes.
if it's one person, that is one person for no reason,
Right.
for no good reason, you chose to do that.
And progressives have been really open about what their goals are for a while, I think. You would often hear them talk about dismantling or disrupting norms. I remember hearing that from Alexandria Ocasio Cortez a lot. And I think for a while, I know I used to hear it and think, what does that even mean? This is stupid. I don't know what that means. Just hand wave it away. But the reality is, this is what it means. So, what it means is anything that is normal. So, the existence of men and women, two plus two equals four, adults and children, a man and a woman meet, get married, have kids. These are all norms that in many cases have been around in our society for, 300,000 years since the dawn of humanity. And for some reason, they wish to dismantle it or disrupt it because they believe that every single category, categorizing you as a man, as a woman, as black, as white, as an adult, as a child, that these are oppressive categories. And we are liberated from these oppressive categories by basically getting rid of them. And I think this is not only is this insane, what's the purpose of it? Who's suggesting this? Why? Where are you getting that this is somehow liberating? Pretending that men and women don't exist, how is that liberating for anybody? And I think conservatives and anyone who's anti woke or normal, who likes the way we exist in society now, needs to understand this and they need to start asking questions and putting them on the defensive because we are the vast majority, and not just vast majority, but vast, vast, vast majority. People in other countries, they like the way normal society is as well. And you see in Russia and China, huge countries, they don't like this woke stuff and they're actually making laws to stop it from hitting their shores.
Mm,
So the vast majority of all humans want to live the way we've all been living since the beginning of time. These progressives, they need to be put on the defensive and explain why. Why exactly do we have to disrupt normal things? Explain to us why, because I don't see the point of it, and I certainly don't see how that liberates anybody.
mm. That's a really good discussion point there of, um, that liberty, individual freedom. I think this is a point where a lot of conservatives can get tripped up on
Yes.
because we're the side like, yeah, individual rights. We've we want liberty and justice for all. Like we really get that patriotic bent going,
Right.
and we go back into it, and that's why I like your piece there of putting them on the defensive, and by not doing some of the silly things that show up on some of these protests. Like I think over the weekend there was that, like, I don't remember even what it was, but those Nazis that were lined up and protesting something. Like
Right.
we've seen those things time and time again. You can make with that what you will, but seems fishy.
Right.
And so it's not about that. It's about asking questions. Like, what when you say liberty, what do you mean? Like,
Exactly.
ask questions, get definitions, and you'll soon be able to tell some of the good faith actors out there from just the complete brainwashed, whatever you wanna
Right.
call them. The good faith actors might look back and like, "Hmm, yeah, I'm not sure, that is a little strange, let me get back to you," or,
Exactly.
just are actually trying. That's somebody you can sit down and have a conversation with.
Right.
I've had people on Twitter that have accused me of, um, you know, my kids are gonna grow up and hate me, and, uh, like, "You're unfit to be a counselor," blah, blah, blah. Just these lobbed darts that they're throwing. Um, Honestly, for me, and this is me, you guys don't have to do this, but for me, my tactic is ignore, see if it goes away, and this, like, 99.9% of the times it goes away. They're just some anonymous loser that's wants to in internet points, then I move on.
Right.
Other people might be a little bit quicker on that block button, which that's fine too, but what you don't want to do is those random people that aren't in the fray at all to let that stuff get to you, because
Right.
that's all nonsense. Don't don't talk to those people if there's no good faith. But if they're actually sitting down and we're engaging, yeah, you actually can change minds in those situations, but you gotta ask the questions, and you gotta sit down and talk.
Right. And you actually learn a lot. And sometimes, and I know this is bad, and there, a lot of people say there's really no value in this, and engaging with people who are fully indoctrinated into the progressive ideology. You might not be able to change their mind, but you learn a lot. You kind of
Yeah,
understand, what exactly do you believe? Why do you believe it? What are your responses to me bringing up scientific facts, or so forth? And I do think there's value. I've learned a lot in engaging with some crazy people online. You kind of see, and you also see, which is interesting, patterns, and you can tell you're just repeating what you heard,
yeah,
which I think is really telling, that people are just, they're just regurgitating what they're told to say, what their friends or their teachers and so forth are told to say. And we need to use that as a tool, given that it's the same argument. You can
mhm,
come back, it's almost like you're arguing with different people, but it's always the same.
yeah.
And I think conservatives need to remember that and start utilizing that, good, especially as we come up on campaigns.
I thought about that very thing. This was, um, goodness, I hadn't thought about this piece in a little while. Did you happen to, torture yourself and watch the 2020, Democratic, National Convention?
Not the whole thing. No,
Oh,
I
man.
just get the clips from it.
I only did a little bit. For those of you, that didn't watch that, it was 2020, so, of course, there was no actual conference or whatever. Um, it was bad. Like, forget the content, like, the Internet's been around for a while. This looked like it was put together, like, in the mid-90s where we had dial-up internet. Like, the production was awful. It was really, really bad. Um all that being aside, they were going through, and I think this is when they were actually giving out the delegates, and we already knew Biden won, but it was, just that kinda show and pony thing that they always do, and they went to Virginia, and they always had some. it wasn't the same type of person that for every state. They would have like maybe a politician for one state and then another one. There was this person that some farmer or something. Like they would just always pick states would pick this random person. Well, for Virginia, I don't remember who it was, but they started going on there, and part of their speech of giving it to Biden was they mentioned that Trump said, "In my state, there are fine people on both sides when white nationalists blah blah blah." And anybody that has watched that was, I believe it was 2017 or 18, um, when these white nationalists and Antifa and all this whole thing happened, and Trump had his infamous, "There are fine people on both sides." And that's all you heard for years up until 2020,
Right.
when all you had to do was listen like 10 seconds later, and he said, "Now the white nationalists, condemn them totally."
Right.
Nobody watches that. Like, that
No.
was spliced for TV, and that was just one of those moments that sitting there watching that live, I'm like, "You're either intentionally being malicious or you're just ignorant, because that's not what happened in the slightest, but you were told to say that."
Yes, and many of those people vote based on that. I mean, how many times can you argue with someone? And I find this all the time. You're arguing with someone who's a somewhat reasonable Democrat, and you can ask them, well, what do you think of all this, the trans stuff, the racial stuff, the COVID stuff, and they hate it all. And then you ask them, well, who are you going to vote for? Obviously, you're not going to vote for the Democrats, right? And it's like, no, I'm going to vote for the Democrats because of fascism or racism. And it just shows you the level of ignorance and how much that they're just relying on whatever news source, probably some mainstream news source, and that's it. They just go there, and whatever the people in the news are telling me, that's the truth. I'm not going to go further down the rabbit hole, because then I hear this a lot. Politics makes me angry. It gives me
Mm,
anxiety. It makes me depressed. So I'm just going to take the very gist of it, and that's it. That's how I'm going to vote. And this, I think, is a huge problem for Republicans that they will not address. Even now, with the disaster of the midterm elections, we heard a lot of, which is good, that they're going to start looking at the way people vote and getting people into early voting and ballots, and not just relying on showing up in the polls, and that's good. But we also have to figure out how to counter this narrative that we're all a bunch of fascist racists. We don't meet that definition. We don't meet the definition of
yeah.
fascists or Nazis or terrorists or all these other horrible terms that they try and throw on us. We need to use that more. We need to weaponize that, as they say, and make them explain what is a fascist and how am I specifically a fascist. Explain that.
Yeah.
We can't just continue to hand wave things off, which is what we're doing now, because that we just keep losing elections.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. That's something that point on, well, politics makes me angry, makes me anxious. To a degree, yeah, it does. And my uh in my article that I recently wrote about conservatives being producers and not just consumers, I didn't use those words, but trying to get into that type of psyche that, yeah, just sitting in front of Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and that's all I do all day, every day, and I don't go outside. I don't do anything. Yeah, that's gonna make you anxious.
Right.
That's not good for you. But the point of that, and the point on my perspective, isn't the answer is not to just, well, everything's fine. There's no problems in the world. We're gonna be good to go. No, like, I in there I asked, what can I do about it?
Right.
And in your case, you're saying, like, you can ask these questions. You can have people around you that maybe they accuse you of being a fascist or whatever. You can answer that. That's not without of your power.
Right.
Um, I can't control what Biden does. I can criticize him, but the things that he does, as administration does, um, I was just complaining this weekend of some of the recent news where my wife and I were trying to build a new house, and new policy is punishing us for having good credit scores.
Yes.
It makes it harder for us to do that. That's annoying. And what I can do, I can definitely complain. I can voice my frustration about that. I can't go to the White House and tell Biden, "Hey, stop doing that." Um, so we need to really have a good idea of what is in my control and then do it. But those peripheral things that are not in your control, we got to learn to let some of those things go. Or what happens is I've seen this with um, some people that are doing good things, but they flame out. They have this passion. I want to stop trans whatever. I want to end abortion. I don't want to XYZ. And that's great. But they focus and focus and focus. And that's their, it's kind of to your point earlier, that's their only focus. We're human beings, and eventually you're going to flame out if you don't structure your life in a healthy way.
Right.
And that becomes disheartening, and then you're out of the fight. You're disengaged because I grounded myself because I went hard and fast for 5 years, but now I can't do it anymore.
Right.
We need to be wise of what is in my control, do that, and once it crosses over that out of my sphere, um, either hand that baton to someone else that can do that, or just get your circle better. Get your circle tighter, get your family better, get your community better, and then go from there. Because if you got the whole world on your shoulders, you're just not gonna be able to do it.
Right. And I think that message is actually really important for left leaning people because they seem to be the ones that take these types of things to heart the most, I think. Specifically, if we're looking at like the trans issue, you hear people saying, well, if you don't, I'm a man and you don't consider me a woman, you're literally killing me. This is literally genocide. But as you know, as a therapist, you don't control the actions of other people. And so when you're working with your clients, you're trying to, and they're upset with, my husband's doing this, my kid's doing this. Well, you need to figure out how to have better coping skills for you because you can't control those people. And I think that's what a lot of young, especially left leaning people need to understand. You can't control others. Even if let's say, God forbid, we do become some sort of authoritarian government and you force us to abide by your ideology, you can never make me believe it. I might be forced to say a man is a woman, but I'm never going to believe it. You can't do that. And people just need to learn to accept that. And this is a huge, I think, honestly, everything that many of our problems come down to just entitlement.
Mm,
I feel I'm very important. I feel that you need to give to me. You need to affirm or what have you for me. And they don't seem to understand that that's not the way it works.
yeah. Yeah, no, that is a again, going just into my profession is a massive, massive problem that now all of a sudden it's my job to affirm everything that you're feeling. Uh, but what if you're wrong? You know?
Right.
That that people can be wrong.
Yes.
And if that is if my job fundamentally is to make my client feel better and that's it, then there's really no point of the profession. You can just well, in fact, honestly, this is something that might be something down the road. They already have some therapy chat GPT type of stuff out there. Um, if we want to just affirm feelings, hey, they that can do better than me. I'm gonna have bad days sometimes. Maybe I'm not gonna be able to make you feel that good. But chat GPT, they can do the job.
Right.
Um, we just as a society and definitely as my profession, um, it goes back into truth that we have to have truth as a bedrock of our culture, of our foundation. Because if it's not there, it's sinking sand, and we get into the rut that unfortunately that we're kind of currently in right now.
Exactly. And I think that you can provide compassion and empathy and even validation without agreeing with somebody.
Mm, mhm.
And when I was getting my master's degree, I got it in mental health counseling, and I had to do a lengthy internship as part of that program. And I did it at a court ordered facility. So all my clients were all there because the courts made them, and they didn't want to be there. And many of them would come in, they got a DUI. Oh, it's not my fault. It was somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. I was
Yeah.
unfairly targeted. And so what I figured out was that if you were antagonistic with them and pushing them towards, well, you need to accept that what you did is wrong, you broke the law, they would shut down, and they would make it really difficult for you to work with
Mhm.
them. But if you provided them a little bit of validation without agreeing with them, it would be much easier to work with them.
Yeah.
So rather than saying, you're right, the system screwed you over, you were not drunk, it was the breathalyzer, I know, I get it, it's a big conspiracy against you. Just saying, yeah, I get that you would feel that way. I understand you're
Mhm.
upset. I understand, you had a lot going on, and you feel like you had just had a couple of beers, you weren't really drunk. I get it. There's ways that you can do that without agreeing with them. And another example of that is religion. You know, everybody or many people have different religions or no religion. And we can respect people of different
Mm.
religions without believing in those religions.
Yes.
So I don't believe that we're the descendants of aliens. Okay, but Scientologists, I understand, do believe that. And I can be friends with Scientologists. I can have good working relationships with them, but without believing in their ideology. And I
Right.
don't hear any religious people saying that we're killing them by not believing in their ideology. And I think this is what people on the left need to understand. I can respect you, I can have empathy and compassion and everything for you, but I don't have to believe in your belief system.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent, excellent point, because that's what it comes down to of why is it such a big deal? It's just pronouns. Like, come on, you're just respecting me. And no, you are forcing me, or at least attempting to force me to change my language over something that is fundamentally a fact of you are a female, you are a male. You can debate that all you want, but that is the truth. And you telling me I have to call you a boy, a girl, a he, a they, or whatever, um, that is that force. It's just like you're saying of um, if I'm a, and I am a Christian, if somebody that's not a Christian, it's like, well, I don't believe your beliefs. And it's like, no, you have to tell me that Jesus died on the cross for your sins. No, you have to. Like, that's not how that works.
Exactly.
Um, uh, we can still have, like you're saying, this respect for one another. No, I'm a Muslim, and okay. And we might have more conversations down the line, and maybe minds are changed at some point. But yeah, there's not that transaction of now you must around me. You are a Christian. I don't care if you are in your personal life or not. You are a Christian now. Like, no, that we don't do that in our society, and that's why something as seemingly little as people will phrase it of pronouns are a really big deal. Forced pronoun usage is a very big deal, and I think that's another one on some of the cultural things that we've kind of pushed that down a little bit of, well, pronouns, whatever, but we just don't need to go to surgery. Like, no,
Yes,
that's all that same ideology that's wrapped up
exactly.
in that.
It's a gateway drug. Using the pronouns kind of leads you down the hole. And it's important that conservatives and anti woke and normies recognize that almost every single argument these so called progressives pose to you, you can immediately turn around back on them. So, why can't you be kind and use the pronouns? Well, why can't you be kind to me and let me live my life the way I want to? That's what we need to be arguing right back, because forcing me to say a man is a woman, or vice versa, is making me lie. It's hurting me. So when you say these things like, what do you care if somebody goes out and gets surgery? Well, I don't. You can do whatever you want, but I'm not going to play with you. And that's what I think we need to make really clear. I don't hear any conservatives, all these laws and so forth, that are saying men can't dress up as women or women as men or so forth. What I hear them saying is, well, number one, you're not going to do that to kids. And number two, you can't force us to believe as you do.
Mhm.
That's all we're saying. You can do what you want, but we don't have to. I don't have to do what you want either. And that's the way it works. If you can do what you want, then so can I can do what I want. If I can't do what I want, then neither can you. And they don't seem to understand that because again, I think they're coming from this entitled mindset where I'm right, I have the right ideology, and you don't. And
Yeah,
so it's okay for me to push my beliefs on you because my beliefs are the right ones. And that's a supremacist mindset. You are
yeah,
not right. Okay. Nobody can stand up and say, I'm the one who knows everything. I'm the one who's always right. You can't say that. And
yeah.
you shouldn't even think that you can.
This I've never quite oh verbalized this before, but um the mindset typically is well, if somebody gets their own they get their goodness, my mind went blank a little bit. We had some toddler fits going on in the in the background there. But okay, so if I have my surgery, I get that because uh I'm going to kill myself if I don't get this surgery, right? That me getting this surgery, me doing pronouns, hormones, that's going to stop me from committing suicide. Now, first off, that's just wrong. The data is not there. If anything, it is flat to even worse. It's We see this with all of our detransitioners that are coming out that now they have all these problems for years down the road. I just saw somebody that's having issues finding a gynecologist, which I wouldn't have thought of that, but it makes sense because doctors don't know how to handle that,
Right.
and it's terrible. So the argument I think sometimes that comes is like from the right is well, um, because the numbers aren't there, therefore, no, this actually isn't the right thing to do to say kids need to get surgery. And well, yeah, that's something. That obviously there's that truth there. That still doesn't address that compelled speech and that compelled like me having to treat you like something that you're not. Even if the suicide rates did go down some, you forcing me to act like you're something else, that's still not right.
Yes.
Um, and we need to understand that it's not just the suicide rate, although that's very important, and we need to look at that. That ideology, even if it was more effective than it is still harmful, by forcing other people to do that.
It's a fantasy world, and ultimately, that was my point with the piece I wrote for the Federalist. In order to win the cultural war, you have to defeat the fantasy world. I mean, that's just
Mm,
the way it is. We can't have this give and take. Well, some people are really trans, but some people aren't. But we'll allow them to trans at this age or not at this age. I mean, what we have to do is just defeat the fantasy world. You know, whatever age you're doing it at, it's a fantasy. Okay, so a
yeah.
man wanting to be a woman or an able-bodied person wanting to be disabled, it's not right. It is a mental illness. It's a fantasy. If you wish to live like that in a free society, of course you have that ability, and I think most people would support your right to do that. But it's not real, and we have to recognize that it's just not real. You're living in a fantasy.
And therein goes back to truth, and for all other type of mental illness, the schizophrenic that says the TV's talking to him, again, you can look at them with compassion and maybe in that moment like, "Oh, okay, what's it saying to you?" or whatever, but you're you don't believe it. You're kinda pacifying that person there in that moment to maybe get them to the hospital or whatever to calm them down. But as a society, we don't try to dictate around that schizophrenic that, yeah, all these TVs, they're talking to you. That's actually
Right.
that's quite cruel to that individual. It's not getting them the help that they need. So why we think this situation's any different
Right.
is quite beyond me, and the amount of social contagion. And in fact, I kind of have to look at myself a little bit, and this is one of those of um, just being able to stay in the fight longer. I have to take myself out in some cases. I've been flooded on Twitter and different things of different pictures of these poor young girls that had double mastectomies and scars everywhere. It's it's horrifying. Like that's especially I look at my young daughter who, I mean, she's only 3. She's not been through puberty or whatever, but I can't imagine my little girl doing that to herself. Like the taking all the, kind of the sexuality and everything out of it, but a woman's breast, like that is the, the main thing that people see that, oh, that's a woman. And to forcibly remove healthy tissue like that away, um,
Right.
won't ever breastfeed their children, maybe not even be able to have children depending on what else they have going on. To take that away from a young girl, um, and then have the audacity to say that I'm the bad guy.
Right.
No, no, that's not how this works. And we need to, even though in those cases there are times that I have to just get off of social media or whatever, and it sometimes makes me physically sick to see some of those pictures. Um, that moral fiber within me, within everybody else, you need to be strengthened by that and to realize, don't let these ideologies, these activists bully you. Like you're not the bad guy there. You rooting for teenage girls to keep their breasts, that you're actually the good guy. You're not the bad guy there.
Yeah, and people need to be stop being so afraid to be canceled, or well, what if my friends don't talk to me anymore? Or what if people look at me funny because I'm not towing the liberal line? Who cares? Do you really want to be friends with those people if that's how they're going to act? If your little boy is liking pink and showing that he likes My Little Ponies or whatever, and you're not willing to put them in a dress or call them she, I mean, if your friends are going to disavow you for that, are they really friends? Why do you want to work for an organization that promotes that? We have to get to a point where we say, you know what, I don't care. That's fine. You don't want to be my friend anymore. You don't want to talk to me anymore. Okay, that's fine. Next.
A and there is that degree of boldness that, while yes, you do have that level of vulnerability, that level of risk, that you come out and speak against some of these ideologues, you're gonna risk something, whether it be your job, a friendship, or whatever, or just anxiety, tension by
Right.
speaking up. So yeah, that is true, but you do gain some things too. You keep your integrity. That
Exactly.
that can't be understated. But even just with us, us talking right now, had both of us chosen to just be quiet, not say anything, then we wouldn't be talking to each other. We
Hmm.
wouldn't be having this type of conversation and be able to encourage other people to have these type of conversations. Am I going to say that this one interview is going to like change the complete world? No, but you never know. You never know if that one person hears that and that it might change one person's life that's
Right.
in your circle. So, yeah, you do have cost, but there are benefits.
Yes.
Um, that I've talked about on some of my older podcasts of some of these conservative counselor groups that I'm associated in. Yeah, we do kind of live in our own little bubble, so to speak, because all the other, like, there's groups that are like therapists helping therapists and stuff. Yeah, they only help you if you have a certain mindset. Um,
Right.
so us having art, like us being upfront and talking, yeah, we kind of have our own little circle, but I tell you, we go to bat for each other. We have a very tight knit community that if none of us said anything, if none of us ever tried to speak out, we wouldn't have that.
Right.
So you are going to get battle partners if you speak out, and you might be able to convince somebody that is nodding their head in agreement with you in silence, if you speak out, they may not be silent anymore. So
Right.
don't let that fear dictate you by not saying anything.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment.
Kind of along those lines, just something that on this new kind of rebranding of the podcast, I want to really focus on that action piece. A lot of what we've already been talking about is centered on that action. But if you had to give the audience one tangible thing in like the next week, something that they can do in this next week to engage the culture a little bit better, what do you think something that the audience could do this next week?
Well, I think there's so many different ways you can do that. I think the most important thing to do is to focus on your family first. So, especially if you have kids, even if your kids are homeschooled, even if you try your best to keep them away from all this nonsense, at some point they will be exposed to it. So, I think you need to inoculate them as best as you can from that. So, what I do with my kids is I talk to them about this ideology as if it's a religion. So, I tell them, okay, you're a boy because God made you like that. If you don't believe in God, you can say you were born with that. Okay, you're a boy because you're born with a boy's body, and that's what makes you a boy. But there are some people out there that think that maybe a boy can become a girl or a girl can become a boy. What do you think? Isn't that silly? Do you think that's possible? No. And of course, they're going to say no. And then you let them know that of course we respect these people. There's different people who believe differently than we do. They go to different churches than we do. So you've got to prepare your kids, especially so that way when they're confronted by this, they know, okay, these are those people who believe that. I know it's wrong, but I'm going to respect them, and they know how to navigate those waters, especially when they're in school. I think that's a really important piece. And I think it's also important when you're dealing with friends or family that you kind of make your beliefs known. And you don't have to be abrasive or demanding, here's what I believe, and I'm screw you if you don't believe like I do. Just make it clear, like, hey, this is where I align. Many of my family members are liberals. And I grew up in a liberal town, liberal family, and I've always been conservative. As soon as I turned 18, I registered as Republican. I just when I was a very young girl, and I could understand. My father was a political junkie, and I could understand the difference between left and right. I knew I was not like them. I was on the right. I've always been there on the right side. And so just making that clear, even subtly. And I think a lot of conservatives sort of know how to do this naturally. When you meet people, you kind of throw out little tidbits to kind of see where people lie. I think conservatives are very used to that. So making that clear to others, so that way you don't find yourself in the closet and having to hide. And I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble is they just sort of toe that line to appease
Mhm.
people, and then they're stuck in the closet and they can't come out. And then sort of the last thing, I think, if people feel comfortable enough with this, is to start speaking out if you can online, like we do,
Mhm.
develop a social presence and find other like-minded people and learn from them and have them learn from you, right? If you can, or even at a bare minimum, if you can get involved in your kid's school, make it clear, like you're emailing the teacher, hey, how's my kid doing? I want to know what my kid's doing in school. Get on the PTA, get on, if you have like a site council or something at your school, get involved in that type of stuff. So you don't have to do anything big and crazy. Not everybody's going to be, a Matt Walsh or somebody, but you
Right.
can do what you can to influence, if not just a smaller circle outside of your family, at least your family unit, and protect them from this nonsense.
I think those are some fantastic, very actionable steps that you can take. And I really like how Rebecca laid that out of that inside out. Start with those families, with your
Yes.
kids, with your spouse. If you're not married or have kids, maybe it's a family member or your roommate, whoever it may be. Start there. You don't have to fix it all at once, but just talk about things. Like Rebecca's saying with kids, especially if you start younger, they get it. My daughter's 3, she knows she's different than her brother, like,
Right.
it's pretty innate. So, just talk about it, don't be ashamed of it. It's kind of, but for parents, especially with, kids that are nearing teenage years, it's kinda like with the sex talk. No one likes that. That's not a fun thing to do, but when you do it and you actually you own it, you don't go in there all timid and nervous, you just get to business and you say it, it's not that bad. And
Right.
then when your kids have more questions, uh, now we've already got the awkward part out of the way and we can just keep going. Um, we can do this with some of these trans ideology and
Right.
critical race theory and all that stuff. Same thing. Just own it, no matter how old your kids are.
Right.
Own it. Get that awkward first talk out of the way, and now we got a dialogue because your kids are going to go to college or get a job or, to your point, even homeschool. Maybe they get on YouTube or get on TikTok or wherever it may be. They're going to be exposed, and you want to have an open line of communication with them. You
Yes.
don't want to have them be taught by the world, just like with the sex talk, they're gonna know about sex somewhere too.
Right.
Um, you want that communication with your kids. So great, start there. And then I'm with Rebecca too, that start somewhere on the um kind of the outer influence and just society. I think oftentimes, this is just my opinion, oftentimes online's a little bit easier because you just do
Yes.
a little tweet, maybe you have an anonymous account. Um, Maybe you write a Substack. Hey, you can go to Rebecca, do a wrong speak Substack article. There's ways that
Right.
you can do that. But I do think that's important practice. That's something um, that I've been doing for the last several months, and by no means am I perfect at it, but I'm a lot better than when I first started. It
Right.
takes getting some lumps. It takes getting attacked.
Yeah.
To kinda understand how do I want to phrase this, and you learn your style, but I do think that is important. Don't start with outside influence, but we do need to get there eventually, and
Right.
start small and find your niche. Don't try to be Matt Walsh. There's only one Matt Walsh.
Right.
Um, be yourself, and wherever that takes you, it takes you. But no, I think that all of those practical pieces are really, really important.
And it's not always about changing minds. I think people feel like they always have to defend themselves and they have to be able to change people's mind and know every single point in and out. You don't have to. It's just a matter of you're just stating your opinion. This is what I believe. Don't get tripped up with, especially with people who are progressive. They might be coming from, high socioeconomic statuses. They got Harvard degrees. They're going to start throwing out all sorts of academic uppity language at you because they want you to go, oh God, I don't know, I'm stupid. Okay, you win.
Mhm, mhm.
No, no. That's not a matter of the person with the most money or the best college degree is the winner. No, it's important to remember we are the status quo. They are not. So they need to be the ones defending this new bizarre way of living. We're not the ones that are defending. So it should never be a matter of defending normalcy. You're not defending
Yeah.
2 + 2 = 4. If you find yourself in that position, get out of it. You're in a very bad situation.
Yes. No, that's a really good point. When you're saying that, it kind of reminded me of the meme. I don't remember what it's called, but it's got like the bell-shaped curve of IQ, and it's got like the people that are at like 50 IQ, and they're like a boy's a boy, a girl's a girl, and then at the like 100 to 120, they're like, well, actually, there's a lot of nuance, and then
Right.
the like 200 IQs, like a boy's a boy, a girl's a girl.
Right.
Um, you do have a lot of those people that are a little bit higher intelligence, but, like, they like to appear to be much smarter than they really are. Yeah, that's a lot of blowhead stuff.
Yes.
Don't let that affect you emotionally. Like, you're
Right.
that they are just trying to throw darts and get easy wins, and you
Yes.
don't have to play that game.
No.
Okay. Well, Rebecca, any last words or things that you would like to end us off with?
I would encourage people to educate themselves, and you don't have to be have a PhD in wokenomics to know what's going on, but educate yourself as best as you can. Try and view a variety of different sources, and don't get disheartened. I know I feel like that quite frequently, but we are making progress. I started getting involved in this stuff pretty intensely a couple years ago, and things have changed significantly since then. So we're definitely making inroads, and I feel really optimistic that the masses will turn against this madness. It's just a matter of how much damage it does before then.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I've got some of Rebecca's information listed down there below. I've got that Federalist article that she recently had published, and some of her wrong speak information in her Twitter. So definitely check her out. She's got some great stuff down there.
Thank
And
you.
again, Rebecca, it was great having you on. Uh, Definitely give her a follow. She's got some pretty good
Please do.
insight.
Thank you. It's
So
great to be here.
absolutely. So I will catch all you guys on the next episode. Continue to keep fighting for truth and really follow Rebecca's advice there of get active, particularly with your family, but also your community around you. But I'll see you guys next episode.